you the ability and tawfiq to participate in this gathering. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this gathering a source of guidance for all of us. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this gathering one of the means of our entry into Jannah. As you brothers know that we are doing a very important discussion about the lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the first and the foremost question that we all need to answer first before we understand anything about this lecture is today, because we are starting this lecture after a gap of the month of Ramadan. So it's important that we review all the things that we have already done before. And very quickly I will go over them inshallah. First and foremost, the question that we all need to answer is that why is it so important to understand the lineage of Rasulullah? Why is it so important to understand the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Because we are talking about the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So let's talk about Rasulullah. Why do we have to understand the ancestors of Rasulullah and what they have done in their life? So the first thing that we all need to understand, we all need to realize that in those times, in Arab society, in Arab culture, every single thing depended upon your lineage. The message that you are propagating, the message that you are calling other people towards, the things that you are striving towards, the effort that you are making for, all of these things, every single thing, they depended upon the lineage of that person. And we as Muslims believe that the lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the most noble and is the most powerful lineage. There is no other lineage more noble and more powerful than the lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the history of mankind. Now if you remember, I have told you that the lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam can be divided into three categories. The first category is from Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam up to Adnan. And Adnan is the 20th grandfather of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this part of the lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we all know, it is set in stone. There is no disagreement among ulama with regards to this lineage of Rasulullah from Muhammad up to Adnan. The second category of the lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is from Adnan to Ismail alayhi salam. So there are three categories of the lineage of Rasulullah. Number one, Muhammad to Adnan. Number two, Adnan to Ismail. And number three, Ismail to Adam alayhi salam. But this is the lineage that we are talking about, because this is the lineage that is set in stone. All ulama, all of the ulamas, whether they are from Sunni ulama or Shia ulama, they all agreed upon this lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then after discussing that lineage, we started talking about the immediate ancestors of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when I said immediate ancestors, we began with Qusay. First of all, we talked about Qusay. Who was Qusay? What did he do? What did he achieve in his life? And then we spoke about Abdul Manaf, and then Hashim, and now inshallah we're going to talk about Abdul Mutalib. Now if you remember, like I was saying, why is it so important to discuss the lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? When we claim, we as Muslims, we claim and we believe that the lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the most powerful lineage, how are you going to establish the fact that the lineage of Rasulullah is the most powerful lineage, is the most noble lineage? So one thing that we all need to understand is that the prestige of a lineage is the things that your ancestors have done. You know, if I ask you what is the prestige of your lineage, you will always mention the things that your ancestors have done. Let me give you an example, and then inshallah you will be able to understand what I'm saying. Today in this world, why do people, if not Muslims, why do people respect Rockefellers? Why do people respect Kennedys? What's the reason? Why do people hold them so, why do people respect them so much? Why do people hold them in such a high status? What's the reason? Why do people respect Rockefellers? Why do people respect Kennedys? Why do people respect Bush? What's the reason? The only reason they respect all these people is because of the ancestors of their ancestors and what they have done. So the ancestors of Rockefellers, the ancestors of Kennedys, one generation after the another, they are doing something. And they are doing something amazing. And because of what their ancestors have done, today they have become Rockefellers. Today they have become Kennedys. If their ancestors haven't done anything, they would be like Tom, Dick and Harry. They would be like every other person. But today these people, they have a special privilege, they have a special honor, they have a special respect because of their, are you with me so far? Because of their ancestors, not lineage, because of their ancestors. So today when you talk about the lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you have to mention that what the ancestors of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam have done in the past. And what's the ancestor of Rasul? Because how do you establish the prestige of a lineage? How do you build the prestige of a lineage? You build the prestige of a lineage on the basis of the actions or on the basis of the achievements that the ancestors have achieved. So when we talk about the lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, let's talk about the few immediate ancestors of Rasulullah. What have they done in their life? What have they done in their life? So we spoke about Qusay, and we understood and realized that politically, the person who established Quraysh in Makkah was Qusay. If you remember, after the discovery of Zamzam, who was in control of Makkah? After the discovery of Zamzam. Before, no one knew about Makkah. After the discovery of Zamzam, and we all know about the story of Zamzam. After the discovery of Zamzam, who came in power in Makkah? It was the tribe called Jurham. And if you remember, Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam, he was married into Jurham. So Jurham came in power. And they stayed in power in Makkah for a very long period of time. Until they started corruption. They started oppressing people. They started overtaxing people. And this was the time when another tribe by the name of Khuza'a, remember that name. So the first tribe name was what? Jurham. They are in power. After the discovery of Zamzam, they are in power. But then they started oppressing people. So who rebelled against them? Another tribe. Its name is Khuza'a. Khuza'a rebelled against them. They overthrew Jurham and they kicked everyone out of Makkah. And when they kicked everyone out of Makkah, they also kicked Quraysh out of Makkah. Do you know about Quraysh? Yeah. Quraysh is the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when Banu Khuza'a, they overthrew Jurham, they kicked everyone out of Makkah except their own people. And when they kicked everyone out of Makkah, the descendants of Quraysh were one of them as well. So the Quraysh, they never lived in Makkah, historically speaking. After Banu Khuza'a took over Makkah, Quraysh never lived in Makkah. Do you understand this? They never lived in Makkah. So how did Quraysh came into power in Makkah? This was this person, Hussein. What did he do? He married the daughter of the chieftain of Khuza'a. One of the daughters of the chieftain of Khuza'a, he married her. And then he demonstrated his skills. And when the chieftain of the tribe named Khuza'a, when he died, the people, because he gained popularity among the people of Makkah, when he died, people decided to choose son-in-law as a new chieftain instead of the sons of the chieftain. Do you understand what I mean? Banu Khuza'a, the chieftain of Banu Khuza'a had sons. But this guy, Hussein, politically he was so smart, he was so intelligent, he demonstrated such skills in front of the people that when the chieftain passed away, who people decided to become a new chieftain? Hussein, even though he was a son-in-law. He was not the son of Khuza'a. Son-in-law. He was a son-in-law. And he became the chieftain. When he became the chieftain, obviously, the sons of the chieftain of Banu Khuza'a, they didn't like it. So a civil war broke out. And this was the time when Hussein invited all the tribes of Quraysh in Makkah. And then all the tribes of Quraysh in Makkah, they fought against Khuza'a. They overthrew Khuza'a and they came in power. So the first time Quraysh came in power in Makkah is because of which person? It's because of Hussein. It's because of Hussein. That's why Hussein is also called Minor Quraysh. He's also called Minor Quraysh. It was because of that person. Abdul Manaf, we don't know much about Abdul Manaf. He is the son of Hussein. We don't know much about Abdul Manaf, but that the thing that we know about Abdul Manaf is because is that he was very well known among the people because of his good looks and because of his leadership. And he became very popular actually in the life of his father. In the life of Hussein, Abdul Manaf became a leader of the Quraysh. Now let's go to Hashim, another very important figure. Hashim, very quickly I will go over it. We all know Surah Al-Quraysh, إِلَافِ قُرَيْشِ إِلَافِهِمْ رِحْلَةَ الشِّتَاءِ وَالصَّيْفِ. And in this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the two journeys that the people of Quraysh used to make in the time of Hashim. In the time of Hashim, what actually happened is that one particular year there was a severe drought and people started dying in Makkah. One particular year there was a severe drought, people start dying. And when people start dying, the narration actually mentions that a man will take his family and he will go in the outskirts of Makkah. He would dig a grave for himself, and he would also dig a grave for his family members. Then all of his family members and he, that person himself, they would sit in their grave and they would wait for their death to come to them. It was such a severe drought that people were actually digging graves for themselves and they were waiting for their own death. At that time, Hashim, he said, enough is enough. We need to do something about it. And he came up with this plan. he said we should institute 2 journeys in a year. We should start making 2 journeys, 2 trading journeys in a year. In the winter, we will go down to Yemen, and in the summer, we will go up to Rome. So he started that 2 journeys in 1 year. Trading journeys, I'm not talking about just some journey. A trading journey, right? In the summer, we will go up to Rome, and in the winter, we will go down. And it was such an amazing idea that Allah mentioned it in the Quran. So Surah Al-Quraysh is about these 2 journeys. That the people of Makkah, they used to make 2 journeys every year, one in winter and one in summer. And one another thing that he did, he established a market in Makkah. He established a market in Kaaba. He said everyone is coming to Makkah. In the whole Arabian Peninsula, where they used to keep their idols, all of the people in Makkah, not Makkah, in Arabian Peninsula, in the entire Arabian Peninsula, different tribes in different places, but they all are keeping their idols where? In Kaaba. In Kaaba. So every year they are coming to Kaaba to do tawaf, to worship their own idols, to do acts of worships. So they all are coming to Makkah, they all are coming to Kaaba, and it's a central place. He said, why don't we establish a market here? Hashim said, why can't we establish a market here? People are already coming here. We will sell them things. So establish a market in Makkah. He established a market in Kaaba. And because of that, he became wealthy. He became a very rich person. And he was not only rich, he was very generous. It is said about Hashim that he would never eat alone. Whenever he would sit down to eat, he would invite someone with him. Anyone, even a stranger, he would invite someone. He became wealthy, he became rich, but he was also very generous. And because of his generosity, because of his wealth, he became popular. And when he became popular, automatically it created jealousy among his family members. So one of his brothers, Abdul hated him. And Abdul son, whose name was Umayyah, hated Hashim. Do you know the rivalry between Banu Hashim and Banu Umayyah? If you only know about Sunnis and Shias and what's the rivalry between them, it's between actually 2 tribes. It's actually between 2 families, not 2 tribes, it's between 2 families. Banu Hashim and Banu Umayyah. This rivalry began from the time of Hashim. And it continued until the time of Islam and even after post-Islam with Abbasis and Umayyads. So Abbasis and Umayyads, this rivalry began in the time of Hashim because he became popular. One another thing that you need to know about Hashim is that he had multiple wives, which used to be the norm in those days. It used to be the norm. He had multiple wives. One of the wives of Hashim was from Yathrib. Yathrib or Yathrib? How do we say it? Yathrib or Yathrib? Yathrib. One of the wives of Hashim was from Yathrib. Now if you just think about it, this was the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This was the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, why would a person from Makkah would marry someone from Yathrib? Do you know how far Yathrib is from Makkah? Even today when you go to Medina from Makkah, how long does it take? And you are going 200 kilometers per hour. I was with Ubaidur Rahman the other day, and he was telling me, even if I drive 200 kilometers an hour, still it would take me 4 hours to reach Medina. So it's still 4 hours from Makkah to Medina, such a long journey. And in those days, you will take days to go to Medina. Days to go to Medina. And a person from Makkah is marrying someone from where? From Yathrib. Why? The plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So 3 generations from him, 1, 2, 3. 3 generations from him, Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would come, and he would have distant cousins in Medina among Ansar. So Abu Ayyub Ansari radiallahu ta'ala, do we know about Abu Ayyub Ansari?
Yeah.
All of us, alhamdulillah. Abu Ayyub Ansari, he was a distant cousin of Rasulullah sallallahu. So this was the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But anyways, Hashim died in Gaza. Do we all know Gaza? The famous Gaza of Palestine? He died in Gaza while he was on a trading trip. He died in Gaza. And that's why some people called Gaza, Gaza to Hashim. The Gaza of Hashim, the city of Hashim. And there is still a masjid, to this day, there is a still masjid in Gaza by the name of Masjid Sayyid Hashim. Still a masjid in Gaza. So he died in Gaza. So obviously he died far, far away from where? Makkah. He lives in Makkah. His wife is in Makkah. But he died far, far away from where? Makkah. Now his wife, she took her son. Now we are going to talk about Abdul Mutalib. She took her son and she went back to Makkah. She went back to Medina. She went back to Medina. And the grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, the grandfather of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was raised in the very city where Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would migrate. Qadr of Allah. This was the qadr. He was raised in Medina, by the way. He was not raised in Makkah. He was raised in Medina. So now, let's talk about Abdul Mutalib. Abdul Mutalib, we all know him by the name of Abdul Mutalib, but his real name is not Abdul Mutalib. His real name is Shaybatul Hasan. Hamd, sorry. His real name is Shaybatul Hamd. Abdul Muttalib, real name is Shaybatul Hamd. Why was he called Shaybatul Hamd? Because you know, Shayba means whitish hair that you get when you become old. Whitish hair. Don't be offended when I said old. You know, even I'm getting my Shayba now. You can't see it because I'm wearing a topi. You can't. But it's beginning to appear now. Shayba, whitish hair. You know, mashallah, where is Haji Nurullah sahab? Subhanallah, my Shaykh sahab. I'm not at the same level, I'm not at that level. Some of you are hiding your Shayba, mashallah. You are the smartest one, the ones who hide their Shayba, the whitish hair. But Shayba is the whitish hair that you get when you become old. And you know, some babies, they are born with whitish hair. There are some people who get whitish hair when they become old, but there are some babies, they are born with whitish hair. Abdul Muttalib, he was born with whitish hair, with whitish streak. And people used to call it, this is the Shayba of praise. These are the whitish hair of praise. So that's why he was called Shaybatul Hamd. And it is said when his father passed away, his mother was pregnant with him. But she didn't tell his uncles about her pregnancy. Because she was worried that if I told his uncles about my pregnancy, they would take the child away from me. Because in those days, the custody of a child will go to the stronger one. I think it's still the case in Pakistan or in most of the Muslim countries that the custody of a child will always go to the stronger one. And the stronger one in this case is Quraysh, not the mother herself. So she moved back to Yathrib, she moved back to Medina without telling his uncles that she is pregnant with him. And when she moved there, then, mashallah, the child was born and she was happy. That now she is safe and her child was safe. And then purposely, she lived a very quiet life. She lived a very, very quiet life because she knew that if his uncles would know about him, they would come and they would take him away from him. Now what happened? They are living in Yathrib. He's growing up in Yathrib. Now again, the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the uncles, not cousins, one of the uncles of Shaybatul Hamd, and his name is Mutalib. One of the uncles of Shaybatul Hamd, and his name is Mutalib. Now he's visiting Yathrib. He's just in Yathrib, he's visiting Yathrib. And he sees Shaybatul Hamd. He sees Shaybatul Hamd and he says, this is my blood. And Allah, this is true. You know, they used to have this gift back then, and they still have this gift. When they see someone, they understand and recognize him. So he said, he is not a Yathrabi. He's not an Ansari. He's not from Medina. He's my blood. He's a Qurayshi. He saw Shaybatul Hamd and he said, he's a Qurayshi. And then he did his investigation and he found out that his mother is actually the wife of my brother. Finally found out that his mother is my wife, is my brother's wife. And then he made a plan, just to cut the long story short. He made a plan. He literally abducted the child. And, because otherwise his family members would not let him go. So he said to the child that, mashallah, you have ancestors in Makkah and your ancestors are so and so and you have such a beautiful lineage. If you go back to Makkah, you will reclaim your honor. He said to Shaykh, you will reclaim your honor. In some narration, he was able to convince his mother. Mutalib was able to convince the mother of Shaybatul Hamd. And in some narration, he was not able. But for sure, definitely his uncles, meaning the uncles from Yathrib, his mamus, Jonke Mamu, his uncles never knew about that person, Mutalib, and how he's abducting the child. So they never. So he took the child, he dashed away on the camel, rushed back to Makkah. When he rushed back to Makkah, the people saw Mutalib with this young boy. They saw Mutalib with this young boy. And they thought, okay, this young boy, he's a slave that he had purchased from Medina. So that's why he called, look at the Abd of Abdul Muttalib. Look at the Abd of Mutalib. Look at the slave of Mutalib. And that's why he was called Abdul Muttalib. But his real name was, do you understand? He was coming back to Makkah with this young boy. So that when they saw him, they said, look at the Abd of Mutalib. Look at the slave of Mutalib. So that's why he was called Abdul Muttalib. Now, Abdul Muttalib, initially he had struggles with his cousins and uncles. Obviously, his father had died. His uncle had taken a lion's share from his property and they're not ready to give it back to him. So he had his initial struggles with his uncles, with his cousins, but he had to prove himself with his uncle. And he proved himself with his uncles and cousins. And then finally he inherited some share of his father from his grandfather's wealth. This is very important to understand. He inherited a share of his father from his Grandfather. He never inherited the share of Hashim, the wealth of Hashim. He inherited the wealth of Abdul Manaf. So he inherited some wealth from his grandfather's wealth. And then finally, through that small wealth, whatever he had, he was able to carve out a legacy for himself. And a beautiful legacy. And it's something that we all need to know and we all need to remember. We need to go back and tell our children about the grandfather of Rasulullah. So, our children, they know everything about Romeo and Juliet. They know everything about this cartoon series called Naruto. I have kids who come here and they tell me the stories about all these animated series. But they don't know about the grandfather of Rasulullah. So let's learn about the legacy of the grandfather of Rasulullah and then go back and tell our children about the grandfather of, who was the grandfather of Rasulullah. And these are the stories, I don't know about you, but these are the stories in Pakistan, in our time, we used to be told over and over and over and over again. And by the way, today, I didn't need to actually prepare the lecture for Seerah. I knew that story of Abdul Mutalib and what he had done in his life. But very quickly, inshallah, I will go over 3 things that happened in his lifetime. 3 mega instances, big instances that happened in his lifetime. Number 1, rediscovery of Zamzam. I don't know if you remember, but I mentioned something about Zamzam. Rediscovery of Zamzam. Number 2, the sacrifice of his son, Abdullah. And number 3, the story of Abraha and elephants. At least we all know this story. The story of elephants, the story of Abraham. So these 3 things. Number 1, rediscovery of Zamzam. What do you mean by rediscovery of Zamzam? Zamzam was already discovered in the time of Ismail alayhi salam. So how did he rediscover Zamzam? Remember I told you the first tribe who was in charge of Makkah, politically who was in charge of Makkah, the first tribe was, what was the name of that tribe? Jurham. And then who overthrew them? Khuza'a. So when Khuza'a overthrew them and Jurham knew that they're going to lose the battle now, they're going to lose the war, they did a very drastic deed. They did something really terrible. They buried Zamzam. They destroyed Zamzam. They destroyed it. And it doesn't matter how much Banu Khuza'a tried, they couldn't discover it. They kept digging and digging and digging and nothing is happening. Nothing is happening. For over 3 centuries, for over 300 years, the people of Makkah were forced to get water through other sources. They didn't have water in the city. They had to get water through other sources. And they didn't leave Makkah obviously because in Makkah there is a house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They had prestige and power because of that house of Allah. So they didn't leave Makkah, but they were forced to get water through other sources. For 3 centuries, they couldn't discover Zamzam. Then what happened? Abdul Muttalib came. Look, this is the grandfather of it. It's building up. The lineage of Rasulullah, it's building up. Hussein did the politics. He was known for his leadership. Hashim was known for his economy. He did the wealthing, right? Now Abdul Muttalib. All of these grandfathers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they changed the course of the history of Quraysh. No one knew Quraysh because of these grandfathers of Rasulullah. Now people started recognizing them. And they did amazing things. Now look at Abdul Muttalib. No one knew about Zamzam. They are digging and nothing is happening. Then what happened? One night he saw a dream. Allah showed him a dream. Allah said, go to this and this place. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, go to such and such place, between this idol, between this stone, between this mark, because there are idols around the Kaaba, right? At that time, there are idols around the Kaaba. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed him the place, that you go to that and that place, and you dig and you will find Zamzam. Initially, he rejected that dream. He ignored that dream. That's just a dream. But he kept on seeing that dream over and over and over and over again, until he realized that this is a sign from Allah. This is a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what did he do? He took his son. At that time, he only had one son. And that son's name was Harith. That was his name. He was the oldest son of Abdul Muttalib. And that's why Abdul Muttalib, the kunyat of Abdul Muttalib, by the way, is Abul Harith. That's the kunyat of Abdul Muttalib. So he took his son, he took an axe, what do you call it? X for axe, whatever you say. And he took a shovel and he went to that place and he started digging. Now the people of Quraysh, they surrounded him and they started mocking him. They said, you think you will be able to find Zamzam when we couldn't find for 300 years, for 400 years? You think you will just dig it and you will dig it with your son and you will find it. You will find Zamzam. But he kept on digging and digging and digging until he struck something that was more precious than gold. He struck something that was more precious than oil. Now nowadays we have oil, everywhere is oil. He struck something more precious than oil. He rediscovered Zamzam. And when the water was bubbling up, Quraysh came and they said, this is our property. Subhanallah. He discovered it, but Quraysh came. His own relatives, his uncles, cousins, they all came. It's our property. He said, no. I have the right. I have discovered it. I have the right. And by the way, it's not like he's not going to give them water. It's not like this. They say that this is mine and you cannot take water from it. It's not like this. But with this, a prestige comes. With this, a power. By claiming Zamzam, he knows that I will get some prestige. I will get some power that I never got before in the past. He knew that. That's why he said no. And there was a war, a civil kind of war. I shouldn't say war, a scuffle. There was a scuffle that was about to happen, and that could lead to someone's life. That could lead to someone's death. There was a scuffle that about to happen. And at that point, remember that, it's an important point. When they had this argument, that Abdul Mutalib said that this is my Zamzam, and they said no, this is our property. When they had this scuffle, at that time, because they were about to fight now, at that time he made a vow to Allah. He made a qasam to Allah. He said, Ya Allah, if you ever give me 10 sons to defend myself, because at that time he was alone, and he only had one son. He made a vow to Allah, that Ya Allah, if you ever give me 10 sons to defend myself, I will sacrifice one of them for you. I will give one of them to you. That's the time he made a vow. But then finally, they argued and argued and argued, but Quraysh never wanted to kill Abdul Muttalib. At the end of the day, he discovered Zamzam, right? So they never wanted to kill Abdul Muttalib. So they said, okay, we will go to this priestess. We will go to that fortune teller. Again, their religion is what? It's paganism. It's not Islam. Their religion is paganism. And who is their alim? Who is their elder? It's some priest. It's some priestess. Just like in Hindu mazhab, in Hindu religion, you have what? What do you call the religious scholars of Hindus? Pandits, right? Pandit, na? So they have this priestess that they used to trust a lot. They said, okay, we go to that priestess, and she lived far away from Makkah. So they said, we go to the priestess, whatever she decides, we will accept. So if she says that this Zamzam is your property, we will, okay, it's your property. If they say that Zamzam is Quraysh property, then it will be our property. So they agreed on it. And then but what happened is that when they were on their way, they got lost. All of them. When they were on their way to that priestess, they got lost. By the way, this is the time, we're not talking about today's age and time. 14, 15 centuries ago, no navigation system, no maps, nothing. And you are traveling in a desert. And traveling in a desert can be very, very lethal. If you don't have supplies, you die. It's as simple as this is. If you don't have supplies, you die. So they got lost. And all of these people, they are cousins and relatives. And they were about to die. And they became so weak that Abdul Muttalib said to every one of them that each one of you should dig your grave. Each one of you should dig your grave, because we are too weak to dig each other's grave. Or we are too weak to bury each other. So each one of us should dig our own grave. And then what happened? Abdul Muttalib, he's digging the grave. Everyone else is digging the grave. They are all digging their own grave. Abdul Muttalib, he's digging the grave, and water came again. He's digging the grave, and he struck the water again. Water started bubbling up again. And at that time, those people, his own relatives and friends, he said, this is a sign from Allah that Zamzam belongs to you. Because once again you struck water, and that water saved our life. So we don't have to go to the priestess. This is a sign from Allah, Zamzam belongs to you. So they went back to Makkah without meeting that priestess, and they gave voluntarily, they gave the rights of Zamzam to Abdul Muttalib. So that was the first thing. Second thing, inshallah, very quickly. Should we do the second thing? Very quickly, inshallah, very quickly. He made a vow to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he would sacrifice one of his sons. If Allah gave him how many sons? 10 sons. So eventually, we all know that alhamdulillah, Abdul Muttalib has how many children? How many sons? Sure, 10. 18 children altogether. 12 sons and 6 daughters. Yeah, 12 with 5 or 6 women. 12 sons and 6 daughters. And probably he had more than 12 sons and 6 daughters, because in those days, babies used to die in their youth. A lot of people used to die in their youth. So probably he had more sons and more daughters. But 12 sons of Abdul Muttalib, they lived to become adults. 6 daughters of Abdul Muttalib, they lived to become adults. And by the way, we don't know a lot about all of them. There are few that we know, because a lot of them, they died before the coming of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A lot of these sons and daughters of Abdul Muttalib, they died. And remember that Abdullah, who is the father of? Abdullah is the father of Rasulullah. I'm talking about this Abdullah. Abdullah is the father of Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He is one of the youngest child. He's not the youngest one, but one of the youngest child of Abdul Muttalib. That's why Harith, the oldest child of Abdul Muttalib, he died in the life of Abdul Muttalib. A lot of his other sons died in the life of Abdul Mutalib, because Abdul Mutalib lived up to the age of 100. He lived almost the age of 100. And in those days, it was a very long age, because in those days the average age was 30, 40 or 50 years old. So it was a very, very long age, and he lived that long age. So Haris was his oldest son. Haris was his oldest son. Now, Abdullah, Abu Talib, do we know Abu Talib? The uncle of Rasulullah, Abdullah, Abu Talib, Zubair. Three of them came from one mother. Abdullah, Abu Talib and Zubair. Abbas, do we know Abbas? The uncle of Rasulullah? Abbas and Durrar. They came from another mother. Abbas and, do we know Hamza? Radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, Asadullah. The Hamza, Muqawwam and Hajar. They came from another mother. And Abu Lahab, Tabbat Yada Abi Lahab Matab. Remember the tafsir of Abu Lahab, uncle of Rasulullah? Abu Lahab, all by himself from one mother. He was all by. So these were the 12 sons of Abdul Muttalib. 6 daughters. Number 1, we all know that daughter, Safiya radiyallahu anha. She was the only aunt of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam who accepted Islam. As far as other aunts of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam concerned, we only know one aunt of Rasulullah who was alive when Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam started preaching Islam. What was the name of that aunt? Atika. And then she disappears from Seerah. We don't know if she accepted Islam or not. So I cannot comment on that. I've researched it, or I have tried to find something about Atika, but I couldn't. So we don't know if she accepted it, but she was alive when Prophet ﷺ started preaching Islam. Then we have Hakim. Then we have Umayma. And you know who was Umayma? Okay, a question. Do you know about Zainab bint Jahash? Do we know about Zainab bint Jahash? One of the wives of Rasulullah sallallahu. And why am I asking this question? Because Zainab bint Jahash is the only wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam whose nikah was performed by Allah, not by any other mulana or any other alim sahab or imam sahab. Zainab's nikah, zawwajnakaha, it was performed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and she always used to take pride in it. She always used to tell Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, you may be the most beloved wife of Rasulullah, but my nikah was performed by Allah. So she used to take pride in it. Zainab bint Jahash was the daughter of Umayma, of the puppo of Rasulullah. Do we know puppo? Yeah. Father's sister. So she was the daughter of the father's sisters of Rasulullah. Do you understand it? So who was Zainab bint Jahash? So she married to her own cousin. And Zainab bint Irshad, initially she was married to whom? Zayd. You know the wife, I know a lot of people know this, that anyone who come to me and ask me that, Mulana, what should we name our boy? I always tell them Zayd. The reason why I always tell them Zayd, because this is the name of the only companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam which is mentioned in Quran. So every time you call your son Zayd, you get 30 rewards. Zaya, Da. Each letter get you how many rewards? 10 rewards. فَلَمَّا قَضَى زَيْدٌ مِنْهَا. That's the only name of the companion mentioned in the Quran. Right? So she was initially married to Zayd, but then she got divorced, and then she married to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Umayma was one of the puppo of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then we have Arwa and we have Barra. So these 6 are the daughters of Abdul Muttalib. Now finally, 12 sons of Abdul Muttalib. He made a vow to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you ever give me how many sons? 10. I will sacrifice one for the sake of Allah. So these 12 sons, when they reached adulthood, when they all became adults, he told them about his vow. And he said, I am the man of my word. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed me with all of you. I have to give up one of you for the sake of Allah. I have to sacrifice one of you for the sake of Allah. And we know that story. He took whom? He took Abdullah in front of Kaaba. He chose Abdullah. So when he took Abdullah in front of Kaaba, Abdullah was the most beloved son of Abdul Muttalib. Everyone used to love Abdullah. Everyone in the Quraysh used to love Abdullah. So when he took him to Kaaba, everyone started complaining. He said, how can you kill Abdullah? How can you sacrifice Abdullah? We all love him. And he's only 17 years old. He was just 17 years old. How can you kill him? So why don't you go to that priestess, some other priestess, not that other, some priestess, one of the elite priestesses of them. You go to them and you ask them, and probably they will give you some way out. So you go to them and ask them, and then you don't have to sacrifice your own son, Abdullah. So he went to that priestess. And when he went to that priestess, this was the time when 100 camels was instituted. Do you know about this thing about 100 camels? No? Do Do you know this thing about that we say blood money? Diyat? कोई पता नहीं सब सुनो यार मैं खा गया इधर कुछ तो रिस्पॉन्स दो. Do you know about blood money or diyat? One person's life is equivalent to how many camels? 100 camels. Where did it come from? Here. Even in our Sharia, it says that one person's life is equal to 100 camels. So if you kill someone accidentally, you give diyat, you give blood money. What is the blood money? 100 camels. If you kill someone intentionally, you murder someone intentionally, and the family does not want to take revenge, and the family says, okay, we don't want to kill you, in return, we want you to give us blood money. Remember the incident that happened in Pakistan, Raymond Davis incident? Do you remember that? He gave that blood money. So I thought you should know about that because it was a huge issue at that time. Blood money, 100 camels. We don't want you to be killed in return. So we want you to give us some money, blood money. What is that blood money? 100 camels. How do you convert them into modern thing? You will calculate the amount of 100 camels in pounds. Calculate the amount of, and that calculation of that amount of money will be the blood money. And where did it come from? It come from the incident of the sacrifice of Abdul. So when Abdul went to that priestess and he asked if there is any way out for me, she said 100 camels, give the sacrifice of 100 camels and the life of your son will be spared. And this is something that our Sharia also confirmed. So these were the two incidents. Last incident, which was a long incident, which is a long incident, is the incident of Abraha, the story of Abraha and the elephants. Inshallah, I will try to tell you the details that you don't know. Most of the people, we don't know about that details. We think we know the story of Abraha and the story of elephants, but there are certain details that not a lot of Muslims know. Inshallah, those details I'm going to share with you, inshallah, in the next Seerah class. So kindly, please keep coming. And one thing more, I can understand and realize that Seerah can become boring, because the time of Rasulullah is the life of Rasulullah. We're talking about the history and this and that. Important to understand. Because Seerah, inshallah, will provide you all the answers. People will ask you questions. People will say things about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The only way you will be able to answer all those questions if you know the Seerah of Rasulullah. Now, at least you know the lineage of Rasulullah, what his ancestors had done. Now, you can tell people that why the lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, why is it so noble? Why is it so powerful? Now, you can tell them, inshallah. And I will strongly urge you, whatever you have learned here, because here we discuss it in an academic way. When you go back home, tell your children about the stories of Rasulullah sallallahu, about the grandfather of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, especially the story of Zamzam. It was an amazing story, and every child knows Zamzam. Every child knows Zamzam. So tell them the story of Zamzam and how it was buried, and then how it was rediscovered by the grandfather of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And finally, inshallah, when I finish this, when I finish the legacy of Abdul Mutalib, just for the sake of your interest, a lot of people they were asking me that why don't you talk about the signs of the Day of Judgment? Because we people, no offense, but we people never talk about the relative issues, the issues that has to do with our daily life. We want to talk about the Sa'at of Qiyamah, about the signs of Qiyamah and what will happen and who are Illuminatis and who are Masons, Freemasons and this kind of stuff. And we are so obsessed with this stuff that we are not doing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to do in our daily life. Yeah. If you remember in the last reminder, I told all of you that never undermine the importance of the good that you can do on daily basis. So we are not doing those goods that we can do on daily basis. All we are concerned about are the signs of the Day of Judgment. So inshallah, after I finish this story of Abdul Mutalib, I will talk about the days of judgment. I will talk about the signs of the Day of Judgment, inshallah. Probably I will take 1 or 2 or 3 lecture series to go over all of these signs of the Day of Judgment. But inshallah, in the next session, we will complete the story of Abdul Mutalib, the story of Abraham, and the story of Ashab al-Fil. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant understanding. May Allah give us the understanding of what we learned today. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you.